Okay, let's talk about Kate Cox. I'll go over the facts in case you're not aware of them. Cox is a 31-year-old woman in Texas who fell pregnant this year with a fetus that she very much wanted to bring to term. Unfortunately, when she was about 20 weeks pregnant, her doctors informed her that her fetus had a genetic abnormality called trisomy 18 or Edwards syndrome. The condition has no cure, and it ranges in severity, but most fetuses with it die before birth. Most babies born with it die painfully within 2 weeks. Less than 10% make it to their first birthday, and a handful survive to their teens with nonstop extensive care. In extremely rare cases, a person with trisomy 18 may have a functional heart that allows them to live to 40 with severe disabilities. Cox wasn't so lucky, and her doctors told her that her fetus had absolutely zero chance of living long after birth, if it even got that far. Furthermore, they informed her that continuing to carry the pregnancy would jeopardize her own health and her future fertility, as she would likely require a C-section, which would put her at risk of uterine rupture and hysterectomy. Cox obviously was aware that after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, Texas moved immediately to effectively ban abortion. However, she also knew that they had carved out an exception for the life of the mother, so she assumed that she could end her pregnancy without putting her own life and her own health at risk, and without bringing a baby into the world, only to watch it suffer horribly for a few hours or days before dying. She was wrong. Exceptions for the life of the mother have always just been lip service, referring only to this fantastical scenario in which doctors can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that a woman will die if she brings a pregnancy to term, as if the baby's going to emerge from the womb holding a cartoon bomb with the fuse already lit. Her doctors told her she just could not get an abortion in her home state of Texas, so Cox contacted the Center for Reproductive Rights, which quickly moved to file a case against the state of Texas for emergency authorization for an abortion, allowing her to get treatment without punishing herself, her husband, or her doctors, all of whom would ordinarily be punished under Texas law. The judge in that case granted her request, stating that to do otherwise would be a genuine miscarriage of justice. Pun intended. Unfortunately, as happens in cases like this, a miscarriage happened anyway, and unable to expel it naturally, the state of Texas was forced to let it rot and develop an infection. That infection's name is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who within a few hours of that decision sent a threatening letter to the hospitals where Cox's doctor worked, stating that Texas would prosecute them after the judge's order expired if they gave Cox an abortion. The Texas Supreme Court then stayed that first ruling and determined that Cox could not, in fact, receive an abortion in that state. So Cox was forced to flee the state to get an abortion. A new poll finds that, unsurprisingly, 83% of Americans disapproved of Texas's actions in this case. And that includes Republicans, by the way, amongst whom 74% disapproved. I say unsurprisingly because poll after poll after poll shows that Americans overwhelmingly support abortion access and disapprove of the government inserting itself into the decision-making process between a pregnant person and their doctor. And that's just for any generic abortion. In this case, Kate Cox is the perfect ideal subject to the average American, including especially to conservatives. She's a white, heterosexual, cisgender, married woman. She already has 2 young children with her husband. They very much wanted to have a large family. They were excited to be pregnant again, and they wanted to bring this fetus to term. And the pregnancy was, without a doubt, non-viable. The fetus would likely not even make it to term, and if it did, it would absolutely die horribly soon after birth. And this pregnancy, if continued, would very likely negatively affect Cox's ability to have children in the future. It's equally fortunate that Cox was educated and wealthy enough to immediately get legal assistance, and wealthy enough to be able to leave the state in order to get the care she needed. I'm calling all of this out because this is exactly the endgame that we've been warning about for decades, well before the Supreme Court threw out Roe v. Wade. This was never about protecting babies, but about controlling and punishing women. And so the result was always going to be bad for all women, not just those who didn't want to be pregnant. In fact, as I've previously said, in a way, the outlawing of abortion is even worse for people who do want children for exactly this reason. If you don't want kids and you get pregnant and you have the means, you leave the state immediately to get an abortion. But if you do want kids and you get pregnant, you're in for 9 months of anxiety. What if you get cancer or some other disorder in which the treatment could harm the fetus? The longer you remain pregnant, the worse things will be if you need an abortion and can't get one. All the way up until you give birth and you wonder, if a life-threatening complication should occur, will you get the treatment that you need, or will the doctors worry about being prosecuted for not doing enough to help the child instead of the mother? And so while Cox's story is upsetting, we've always known that this was going to happen. And that's why if this story upsets you, you need to look back at all the cases that led to this that maybe didn't upset you enough to get you out voting or protesting, but that inevitably led to this moment in time, like the heartbeat and fetal pain bans that make it difficult for people to get abortions if they don't know about health complications early enough, or if they can't access health care quickly enough. The banning of Medicaid or even private insurance covering abortion care that stops poor people from getting abortions. Parental consent requirements that mean a parent can force their underage child to give birth. The limiting of abortion care to medical doctors with hospital admitting privileges, which led to the closure of clinics, meaning that poor people had a harder time getting to that care. Forced counseling prior to abortion, which extends the amount of time it takes for people to get care, which means poor people, often traveling in from other areas, need to spend more money on hotels and take more time off work. All of these laws that have been passed in various states over the past decade that mostly affected poor, marginalized people. All of those finally and inexorably led to a negative outcome for a woman who even rich conservative white people could finally empathize with. Like I said in 2019, when an Ohio Republican introduced a bill that would charge doctors with murder if they removed an ectopic pregnancy, that shit is the pointy tip of a wedge. And once that point breaks the surface, they're just going to keep pushing and pushing until they get the whole thing jammed in and they can finally put women back in their place, barefoot and pregnant and bleeding out on the floor of the kitchen. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.